Ladies and gentlemen, we need to talk about something that many of you may believe does not apply or affect you, but it does. It is something that is a growing issue. It is not necessarily overlooked or ignored, but no real solution has been implemented, at least not in the US and a few other nations. And that is our schooling system. It is not an education system, folks. It is a schooling system. There is a difference. You know, Mark Twain once said, "I never let schooling interfere with my education." And after this presentation, you will understand why. So whether you're in school, out of school, have children, have no children, listen up, because this is important and it does affect us all. After all, school is not an institution of education. It is an institution of control. You know, folks, I once told someone that Finland has some of the best schools in the world. Do you know what that person's response was? Finland? Where's that? So first and foremost, the schooling system, at least here in the States, is about making money and controlling the thoughts of the public. That's it. It has absolutely very little to do with authentic education. That is a disguise. Now, to understand the modern day schooling system, we have to go back to 19th century Prussia, which mainly what we know to be modern day Germany. And this empire existed up until World War I. And what they did was they found a way to divide their education system into three main parts. First would be the people who make policies. The second would be composed of doctors, lawyers, engineers, and architects. And finally, common laborers. This system was put in place so that they could ultimately control what a child was learning and how, by limiting what they could think about and how long they could think about it, as well as controlling when a child was allowed to think about something else. All triggered by the sound of a ringing bell, similar to the Pavlovian dog method. Now this is where degrees come from. Edward Everett was the first American to earn a doctorate in philosophy there in the 1800s. Also, the majority of people to earn degrees in Germany came back to the US and staffed all major universities at that time, bringing with them the idea that the state is the true father of children. Sound familiar? Fast forward to the early 1900s and we have J.D. Rockefeller, who would go on a mission to create and fund several institutions such as Rockefeller University, Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, also the Harvard School of Public Health, just to name a few. His money was dumped into the General Education Board in 1906 and several NGO foundations, nonprofits. All of these things were set to manipulate and influence politicians. And the Rockefeller family would go on to control school textbook companies and literature copyrights, thus controlling the narrative of history. They would also manipulate educational taxes through property ownership. Finally, the NGO foundation setup would also control the flow of funds to public schools and community colleges. The ultimate goal here, folks, was to control the behavior of the nation's citizens. The elitist mentality to prepare the people to be slaves in the field. But of course, things didn't go exactly as planned, as we have had 2 world wars since then. After the Second World War, America headed into the industrial age. The economy was growing, and the US looked as though it was going to be all right, and it was, for a little while. And then in the late 60s and early 70s, things changed, starting with teacher training, resurrecting the old ideas of the early 1900s. Oh no, oh yes. How many of you have heard of the Dear Hillary letter? Well, in 1998, Republican Bob Schaefer put into the Congressional Record an 18-page document, also known as Mark Tucker's Dear Hillary letter, a plan for the Clinton administration to take over the entire U.S. educational system in order to benefit the economic planning of the workforce, to remold the entire American system, a seamless web that literally extends from cradle to grave and is the same system for everyone. A system of labor market boards at the local, state, and federal levels, job matching, accessing the integrated computer-based program. If you've never heard of this letter, or if you have never read it, I encourage you to do so, as it will give you insight into the crisscross mentality of some of our political leaders, and why our school system is the way it is today in the U.S. No Child Left Behind, Common Core state standards, race to the top, from Clinton to Bush to Obama. This failing initiative to better educate our children has been in development going way back, and now you know how far back this goes and where it originated. We have 0 to 3 and now Head Start programs where children start school as young as 3. They literally want to extend the schooling from cradle to grave. So what are the results of all this in billions of dollars in funding? According to the World Top 20 project, as of 2017, the U.S. ranks number 20. According to the Program for International Student Assessment Tests, or PISA test, the U.S. is number 32. You can go to almost any official ranking system and it will be rare to find the U.S. above 14th place, even as some of our top universities rank much higher. Schools like Harvard and MIT, of course. So the U.S. must be number 1 in something, right? Of course they are. The U.S. is number 1 in military spending. We are number 1 in incarcerations. We are number 1 in childhood obesity. We are number 1 in hours of television watched. We are the number 1 in national debt. We have the most debt of any country ever. Over 60% of the students who begin college graduate in 6 years, and those who did not graduate have a collective debt of over $1 trillion. And over 70% of the students who do finish move back in with their parents. Meanwhile, people from ages 18 to 26 have the highest unemployment rate. Now, because these figures will vary according to where you pull the stats, you can only consider them to be an estimation, but they do provide us with a pretty fair idea of where the U.S. is at in terms of education. Even though we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on education per year. I'm talking $600+ billion each year. And you're probably scratching your head right now thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, where the money goes in America never made any sense. And apparently, it ain't going to the schools. So aside from the money lost in the machine, what is the problem here? There are several. First, our ideal of schooling comes from the industrial age of training people to be factory workers. And all day long, children are treated as such, being constantly told what to do and when to do it. Children are constantly rewarded for being obedient. In the real world, you need creativity, problem solving, and communication skills that are most restricted in our schools today. No talking in class. Art and music has been cut in many schools, and the school will show you how to solve the problem their way. There is no autonomy. Kids can't make their own decisions and are told what to learn, only during the time allotted for that subject. One of the biggest problems is that children are not learning anymore. They are memorizing. This is not authentic learning, and most of the time, the children forget what they have learned right after their testing or the day of. That brings up another issue: standardized testing. Today's schools are geared toward training kids not to learn, but to pass tests. After all, if your school can't pass the test, then your school can't get the funding, which leads to another problem. Private schools compete with public schools. The more money private schools get, the less money public schools get, hence resulting in what we see today. Poor public schools with no money giving the rise to charter schools. Our curriculum sucks. Children are learning useless facts and are graded on a system: A's, B's, C's, D's, E's, and F's, which is very unhealthy for a child and causing stress on the child and their parents. How many of you were punished for bringing home bad grades? Today, children are put through a system where they can not learn what they want to learn. They have to learn the same thing as everyone else, at the same time, at the same place, at the same pace. If they cannot, then the child is looked at as if something is wrong with them. They are constantly held back from what they have interest in, and therefore end up never finding out what they are really good at, and can never quite come to a decision about what they want to do with themselves later in life. Children are treated as failures if they cannot keep up with the rest of the class, diminishing confidence and stressing the child, as kids who get too far ahead tend to develop challenges staying interested. We live in a school system designed for robots and mindless workers. We have the internet, folks. We have access to a world of information that in most cases is restricted and blocked in our schools today. So where are they getting their information from? I'll tell you. It is made up unnecessary crap tethered from our Nazi-based mock education mind control construct. I mean, look at this crap. A robot avatar for chronically ill children? What's this kid missing out on? Just homeschool your kid already. Worst of all is the chaos. You think this is about gun control? No, it's about child control. It's about parent control. It's about fear. Folks, you know why children in schools such as Finland do so well? You know why they have some of the best schools in the world? First, they have no homework. And if they do homework, it's usually 10 to 15 minutes worth. They only go to school for about 20 hours a week. They don't have standardized tests. In fact, the only test they have comes at the end of their senior year in high school. They don't have to ask to use the bathroom. They don't have hall passes. They're allowed to interact with each other, and more importantly, they're allowed to be children. Many of their schools make it a point to send their children out to play multiple times in the day, because after a certain amount of time, a child can only absorb so much information at once, and after that, they stop learning. They only have one type of school: public schools, all paid for, with teachers that are extensively trained, most carrying a master's or higher. The rich kids go to school with everyone else, for that matter. There are no private schools to compete with public schools, thus eliminating the competition, and parents do not have to spend time and resources shopping for schools year after year. In Finland, all the schools are the same. Also, kids don't start school till age 7. Are you getting the idea here, folks? Children there are treated as independents and are allowed to move at their own pace. Many of their kids speak several languages and do extremely well in international testing. In fact, they have some of the best scores worldwide. One of the reasons being because they don't memorize things, they learn them. Remember, everyone, Many of the kids brought up in this school system today, they are going to be our doctors, they are going to be our lawyers, engineers, they are going to take over major companies and political offices. They are going to be our law enforcement, all under this current school system. Finland's school system is actually based on ideas that were originally here in America. I wonder what happened. What we do know is our school system here is failing, and it is failing our children. And if let be, it will affect us as adults, because these are the kids you're going to have to deal with later in life. Now that I have disgusted you with all this info, fortunately in America we still have a certain degree of choices. How long they will be there is up to us, I guess. But the school year is coming to a close, and many of you with children have some things to think about over the summer before the start of the next school year. Before I go, I want to leave you with something that Einstein once said. And many of you may now understand, after being out of school for some time, what this means. But he said, education is what remains after one has forgotten everything one has learned in school.